The rain had been falling since late afternoon, soft at first, then heavier, soaking the forest floor in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. The sky was a blanket of gray, and beneath it stood a solitary cabin tucked into the edge of the woods, where the trees whispered secrets no one else could hear. Inside, the only sound was the quiet crackle of firewood and the low hum of a kettle warming on the stove. The air smelled of cedar, pine, and something faintly sweet, like cinnamon clinging to the walls from an old memory. Maya stood at the window, wrapped in an oversized knit sweater that draped off one shoulder, her fingertips brushing the glass as she watched the rain. She hadn't expected to be here alone. This cabin was meant to be shared, a retreat she had planned with someone long gone. But tonight, it was just her and the storm. Until headlights cut through the mist. A black SUV pulled up slowly, tires crunching wet gravel. The engine shut off. Then silence again, except for the rain and Maya's shallow breath. A knock at the door. Soft. Hesitant. She hesitated, her heart fluttering, not with fear, but curiosity. She opened the door. There he stood, soaked to the bone. Broad shoulders beneath a dark jacket, water dripping from his short hair, eyes wide like he hadn't expected anyone to answer. I'm sorry, he said, voice low and deep. My GPS led me off course. My phone died. I didn't know anyone was here. I just saw the light. Maya blinked. He looked more like a dream than a man, rugged, calm, as if the rain itself had molded him from mist and longing. You're freezing, she said softly. Come in. He stepped inside, careful, respectful. She handed him a towel from the hook, their fingers brushing just briefly, warm skin against cold fingertips. That small contact, it lingered. I'm Adam, he said, drying his hair. Maya. For a moment, they stood there. Two strangers in a wooden cabin with only the rain to fill the silence between them. Can I offer you tea? She asked. Please. She moved to the stove, her hips swaying ever so slightly in her thick sweater, and he found himself drawn to the way she moved, slow, deliberate, like she lived in a softer world. A quieter one. They sat near the fire, the glow dancing across their faces, cups of tea warming their hands. Conversation started cautiously. Where he'd come from. Why she was here. Words melted into laughter. Laughter into glances that lingered a second too long. I don't usually do this, she whispered later, voice barely above the fire's pop. Let strangers in. Trust them. Adam looked at her. His eyes held something raw. Honest. I don't usually get lost, he murmured. But I'm glad I did. She smiled faintly, setting her cup down. You look tired. I am, he said, eyes growing heavy. There's a guest room. Fresh sheets, soft pillows. He stood slowly, hesitated. Would you mind staying until I fall asleep? Maya paused, then nodded. She walked with him to the room, tucked him in like a lover she hadn't yet kissed. Her fingers smoothed the blanket over his chest, and he caught her hand, gently. Thank you, he whispered. She didn't answer. She just sat at the edge of the bed, listening to the rain, to his breathing, to the heartbeat of something new. As his eyes closed and sleep overtook him, she leaned in just once, her lips brushing his forehead in a kiss neither of them could explain. And then, silence. Just the rain. And two hearts whispering beneath it. The morning came not with light, but with softness. The storm had quieted. Rain now whispered instead of roared, tracing gentle lines down the cabin windows. A thick fog curled through the trees outside like nature itself was still sleeping, Inside, the cabin was warm, blanketed in silence and the slow breath of early hours. Maya stirred first. She had dozed off in the chair by the guest bed, curled up beneath a blanket she had intended only for Adam. But the warmth of the fire, the weight of the moment, and the quiet comfort of not being alone, it had lulled her. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the gray light. And then she saw him. Adam was still asleep, his face calm, relaxed. One arm stretched across the pillow, the other resting gently over the edge of the blanket she had laid so carefully over him. His breath moved in a slow, steady rhythm, like waves brushing the shore. She watched him for a moment longer than she should have. But she couldn't look away. He looked beautiful in sleep. Not just handsome, but unguarded. Safe. As if the rain had washed something away from him. She stood quietly, careful not to wake him, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath her as she moved. She lit the stove, boiled water, and prepared 2 mugs of dark roast coffee, the scent drifting warmly through the cabin like a slow exhale. When she returned to the room, Adam's eyes were open. Not startled. Just there. Watching her like she was something peaceful he wasn't ready to let go of yet. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, his voice deeper now, rough like gravel smoothed by water. "Didn't mean to steal your chair." She smiled and handed him the mug. "Didn't mean to fall asleep in it." Their fingers touched again as he took it. This time, the contact lingered just a second longer. He took a sip. "This is perfect." "I grind my own beans," she said playfully, and he raised an eyebrow. "Of course you do." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be intimate. That morning laughter between 2 people who have crossed some invisible bridge together, even if they don't know where it leads yet. "Do you want breakfast?" she asked. "Only if you join me." She nodded and stepped into the kitchen, and he followed a moment later, still barefoot, still wrapped in the softness of the moment. They moved like they belonged to the space already, cutting fruit, cracking eggs, stealing glances between every motion. As she reached for a skillet, he leaned past her, close enough that his chest brushed her back, just lightly. She froze for half a heartbeat. So did he. But neither of them pulled away. And then he whispered, low near her ear, "I could get used to mornings like this." Her breath caught. She turned slowly, looking up into eyes that now held something different. Still soft. Still respectful. But deeper now. Hungrier. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "But you let me in." She smiled, biting her lower lip gently, teasingly, and turned back to the stove. "You were soaked." "I'm not heartless." "No," he said, his voice just behind her, "you're warm." And for a moment, everything in the world narrowed to the scent of coffee, the sound of eggs sizzling, and the feeling of him standing just close enough to set her nerves humming, but not close enough to touch. Not yet. Breakfast was slow. Laughter filled. Easy. When it ended, the rain picked up again slightly, just a light, steady tapping on the roof. They moved back to the couch. He wrapped himself in a blanket. She curled her legs beneath her. And without saying anything, she rested her head against his shoulder. He let it happen. And then, slowly, deliberately, he let his hand fall to her thigh. Not possessive. Not suggestive. Just there. Present. And somehow, she felt like she could sleep again. Even in daylight. Even with him. Especially with him. The rain came again in waves, steady and cleansing, like the sky couldn't quite decide whether it wanted to cry or sing. Inside the cabin, everything felt still, wrapped in that after-breakfast haze where time slows and silence becomes something sacred. Maya hadn't moved since she laid her head on Adam's shoulder. And he hadn't asked her to. His body had adjusted to hers like a shoreline welcomes the tide, no resistance, just soft reception. He could smell the faint trace of her shampoo, lavender, and something earthy, something real. Her breath warmed the space beneath his jaw. It was a kind of closeness he hadn't known in years, one without expectation, but heavy with possibility. And when she finally looked up at him, her eyes were different. Sleepy. Curious. Open. "You're warm," she whispered. "So are you." He said it slowly, without flirtation, but she felt it differently this time. Felt it in the pulse that beat behind her ribs. Felt it in the quiet that followed. Felt it in the way his hand was still resting gently on her thigh, unmoving, as if afraid that motion would wake them both from a dream. "I should check the forecast," she said, almost to herself. He nodded. "Or, we could listen to the rain instead." She gave him a look, a soft half-smile. "You really don't want to leave, do you?" "No," he said honestly. "And I don't think you want me to." Maya didn't answer. Instead, she slid her fingers over his, just barely touching, tracing the outline of his knuckles, testing the weight of what hung between them. Then she did something she hadn't planned. Something slow. Something sure. She shifted her legs, turned toward him fully, and brought his hand to her waist. Adam said nothing. But his breathing deepened. His fingertips, now resting just beneath the hem of her sweater, grazed the bare skin of her hip. It was nothing explicit. Nothing loud. But the heat of that contact bloomed like lightning under her skin. "I don't know you," she whispered again. "No," he murmured, brushing his thumb gently along the curve of her side, "but we're getting there." Her lips parted slightly, breath-catching. She leaned in just enough to feel the warmth of his mouth, but stopped. Hovering. Close enough that he could feel the tremble of her need. Close enough that he could taste her breath, sweet with coffee and something more. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. He just looked at her. And said, "If I do, we won't stop at just one." Maya swallowed. Her hand slid up his chest, palm resting over his heartbeat. "I don't want just one," she whispered. But even then, they didn't kiss. They just held there. In that perfect moment between want and surrender. A moment stretched long by restraint and warmed by patience. And when she finally laid her head back against his chest, he exhaled, long, slow, controlled. His hand remained at her waist. Not claiming. Not rushing. Just holding. Present. And the rain kept falling. But inside, something had shifted. They didn't need to speak it. Their bodies already knew. The storm was no longer outside. Outside, the rain turned steady again, no longer the sharp staccato of a sudden storm, but a warm, endless hush. The kind that begged for silence and intimacy. The fire was a low flicker, casting golden shadows across the cabin walls. Adam stood near the window, watching the mist curl over the forest trees, still shirtless from drying off earlier. The edge of dusk painted him in soft blues and firelight gold, his bare shoulders looking almost unreal in the dim. Maya watched him from the couch, her legs curled under her, sweater tugged slightly off one shoulder. Her heartbeat had not slowed since their last moment on that same couch, when his hand had rested just at her waist, when she nearly kissed him and stopped. But this time, she didn't want to stop. "You still cold?" she asked softly, her voice barely above the hush of the rain. Adam turned, eyes meeting hers with the same quiet heat he'd had since morning. "Not really," he replied, his voice low and calm, but the way he looked at her betrayed the storm he was holding inside. She stood. Slowly. Barefoot, her toes sank into the old wooden floorboards, and the soft knit of her sweater brushed against her thighs as she crossed the room. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She just reached for him. Adam didn't move at first, just stood there, letting her hands find his. Letting the space between them collapse with one deep breath. And when she stepped closer, so close her body pressed softly into his chest, he finally reached for her too. His hands cupped her hips, warm and strong. "Maya," he murmured, like a prayer. "If I kiss you now." She silenced him with her lips. No more hovering. No more maybe. Her mouth met his with a slow, aching hunger. Not rough. Not desperate. Just full. Full of all the moments they hadn't taken. All the tension left unspoken. Her arms slipped around his neck, his fingers tightening slightly at her waist, pulling her into him like he'd been waiting for her since the first drop of rain. He kissed her back slowly, deeply. Mouths parting. Breaths tangling. And when her sweater slipped further from her shoulder, he didn't hesitate. He lowered his lips to her skin, bare, warm, and waiting. She gasped softly. Not from shock, but from how gently he kissed her there. Like she was something rare. Something sacred. His hands ran up her back, under the soft knit fabric, fingers trailing along the smooth skin beneath. And then, he pulled away. Just an inch. Just enough to look at her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his forehead resting gently against hers. Maya nodded. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you." They didn't need a bed. Not yet. The floor beneath the window became their world. Pillows. Blankets. The fire's glow. The rhythm of the rain. He laid her down with care, brushing the hair from her cheek. His hands explored her like she was music, each note cherished. Her sweater was peeled away slowly, revealing the soft curve of her body beneath, and he paused just to take her in. "Beautiful," he murmured. She smiled, shy and radiant. And then it was her turn. Her hand slid over his chest, tracing every line, every breath. She kissed his shoulder, his collarbone, his neck, taking her time like he had done with her. No rush. Just rain. And skin. And breath. Their bodies tangled slowly, every motion like a whisper, every touch an offering. She wrapped her legs around him, and he moved with her, in rhythm with the storm outside. Not wild. Not rushed. Just deep. Deliberate. Sacred. And when they reached that moment together, when their bodies melted into one soft, pulsing crescendo, it wasn't loud. It wasn't rough. It was a slow unraveling, a shared surrender. When they finally collapsed into each other, skin damp with warmth and lips tracing slow, lazy kisses across collarbones and forearms, the rain still fell. But inside the cabin, there was no more distance. No more restraint. Only the sound of two hearts, beating quietly in sync beneath the whisper of the storm. The fire had burned lower now, its orange glow casting long shadows on the wooden walls. Their bodies were still entangled on the floor, wrapped in a cocoon of soft blankets and forgotten time. Outside, the storm drummed its steady rhythm on the cabin roof, a lullaby for hearts too full to sleep. Adam's fingers traced slow, lazy patterns along Maya's spine. She lay on her side, facing him, her thigh draped over his, the curve of her body perfectly molded to his warmth. "I never thought a storm could feel like this," she whispered, her voice husky and dreamy. "Like what?" he murmured, brushing his lips along her forehead. "Like it was meant to bring me here, to you." His arms tightened around her, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them was not empty, it was whole. Full of everything they didn't need to say aloud. But then, he stood. Naked, tall, and quiet against the flickering hearth, he extended his hand. "Come with me," he said softly. She took it without hesitation. They crossed the cabin in silence, bare feet touching warm wood, hearts beating steady and slow. The bedroom was dim, lit only by the amber glow of the fire's echo and the moonlight spilling through the gauzy curtains. The bed was wide, rustic. Soft sheets turned down like an invitation. And when Maya lay back against the pillows, her skin glowing, her chest rising with each breath, Adam paused at the edge, his eyes drinking her in like a man seeing the divine. "Tell me what you want," he said, voice thick, reverent. She reached for him. "You. Just you." He climbed onto the bed, not with hunger, but with reverence. Like every inch of her deserved to be discovered. Praised. Loved. Their mouths met again, slower this time. Less fire. More depth. His kisses trailed down her neck, over her collarbone, along the slope of her breasts. Each press of his lips was a promise. "I see you. I feel you. I'm here." Her fingers tangled in his hair, guiding him, inviting him to explore the curves of her. And he did, with patience. With passion. He kissed down her stomach, down her hips, down her thighs, pausing only to whisper words against her skin that made her shiver. When he entered her again, it wasn't like before. It was slower. Deeper. A rhythm made not of desire alone, but of something achingly tender. He moved inside her like he belonged there, like her body had been waiting for his, all this time. They whispered to each other as they moved, soft moans, breathless names, little gasps of joy that were more intimate than any scream. The world outside the cabin vanished. There was only warmth. Only skin and size and the sweet, relentless build of something sacred between them. When they finally climaxed, it was not an explosion, it was a melting. A joining. Their foreheads pressed together, eyes closed, hearts open. They didn't speak right away. They just held each other. His hand resting over her heart. Her lips tracing small circles against his shoulder. And then, finally, in the darkness, she whispered, "Don't let this be a dream." He kissed her gently. "It isn't." They fell asleep wrapped around each other. The rain a lullaby. The fire a heartbeat. And in their dreams, they were still together. The rain had softened overnight. Maya stirred beneath the sheets, eyes still heavy, limbs wrapped in warmth not just from the covers, but from him, Adam. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her like she was something he had dreamed into being. "Good morning," he whispered, brushing a kiss over her bare shoulder. She smiled without opening her eyes. Tell me it's still raining." He leaned toward the window. Just barely. Like the storm is catching its breath. "So are we," she said, pulling him back down beside her. There was no rush to move. No need to speak. They had spent the night discovering each other slowly, intimately, with reverent touches and soft gasps that still hung in the air like incense. But morning brought a different kind of hunger. He kissed her collarbone, lower now, letting his mouth drag over the tender rise of her chest. Her skin was warm beneath his lips, her breathing already changing. Her fingers threaded through his hair, urging him downward, toward the ache that had only deepened with sleep. He reached between her legs, fingers finding her slick and ready. She sighed his name like a prayer, and he responded with a groan, slipping 2 fingers inside while his mouth captured her nipple. She arched beneath him, every inch alive, raw, open. Adam. Her voice was soft, shaking. Like she didn't know whether to beg or surrender. He didn't answer. He just moved, sliding down her body, kissing along her thighs, until his mouth found her center. His tongue was slow, deliberate, drawing circles around her clit while his fingers stroked her deep and rhythmically. She writhed, moaned, clutched the sheets. Every flick of his tongue made her tremble. When she came, it was like a wave breaking after hours of build-up, her back arched, her breath caught, her entire body pulsing with release. He crawled back up, kissed her hard, and whispered against her lips, "Let me stay inside you a little longer this time." And when he entered her again, it was slow, deep. A morning kind of making love, sun-drenched even through rain, where the heat didn't come from fire, but from feeling. His thrusts were long, tender. Her moans soft, melodic. Their fingers tangled. Their foreheads touched. And together, they reached that sweet, slow crescendo that felt like floating. Later, she lay sprawled across his chest, tracing lazy circles with her finger. "I don't even know what day it is," she murmured. "Does it matter?" "Not in here," she said softly. "But out there." A pause. The storm wasn't quite gone, but it was leaving. And they both knew, so was time. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Outside the cabin, the trees glistened with dew. Birds, long silent through the thunder, began their hesitant morning chorus. A world that had been soaked in passion and storm for 2 days was waking up. Maya stood at the window, her naked back to the room, a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders. The curve of her body caught the light. Adam watched her from the bed, chin propped on his palm, memorizing her like a painting he would never see again. "You'll leave today," she said quietly, not turning around. He didn't answer. The silence said enough. They had never planned this. A chance encounter. A shared weekend. But what started as simple escape had become everything else. Intimacy. Honesty. A kind of connection neither had let themselves believe in for years. And now, it couldn't last. "My flight's tomorrow morning," he finally said. "I need to get back to town today." She nodded, still staring out at the fading storm. "I guess that's that." He got up slowly, wrapping the sheet around his hips, crossing the space between them. His hands slid over her arms, warm, grounding. "We don't have to make this dramatic," he murmured. "But it is," she said, turning to face him. Her eyes brimmed with something sharp, sadness, longing, maybe even anger. "You can pretend it's not. You can go back to your life, to your normal. But I'll feel this every time it rains." That hit him. Hard. "I'll write you," he said. "We'll talk." "We won't," she replied, voice soft but final. "We'll need to. But life happens. Distance happens." And yet, she stepped into him anyway. They kissed again, longer this time. Desperate. That kind of kiss where mouths memorize every inch because soon, they won't be allowed to touch at all. Hands wandered. Breath caught. and against every better judgment, he lifted her up, carried her to the fireplace, and made love to her one last time. No rush. No promises. Just the raw, aching beauty of goodbye. They dressed in silence. Packed slowly. Every item folded was a memory being buried. At the door, she reached up and fixed the collar of his coat. He held her hands in his, kissed her forehead. Maybe in another life, he said. Maya smiled. Maybe. And then, he walked out into the clearing mist. It had been 3 days. Maya was still at the cabin, alone now. The rain had vanished completely, replaced by a soft, stubborn chill. Outside, the earth steamed in places where the sun finally broke through. She hadn't meant to stay so long after Adam left. But there was something in the silence that wrapped itself around her, held her the way he did. It felt like he might still be in the walls, in the sheets, in the wood smoke air. On the 4th morning, she found it. A letter. Folded carefully and tucked beneath the last log of firewood. On the front, "For you," written in his unmistakable hand. Her breath caught. She sat on the hearth, blanket wrapped around her legs, and unfolded the page with trembling fingers. Maya, I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to send this, so I'm hiding it here. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you won't. But I needed to say it somewhere. You wrecked me, in the best way. I came here to escape, not to fall. Not to feel. But you made me feel everything. You reminded me of warmth, of laughter, of skin against skin that meant more than just desire. I don't know how to go back to my life pretending this never happened. And I don't know how to ask you to step into mine. Maybe I'm a coward. Or maybe I know your world is just as complicated as mine. But if you ever feel it again, feel this, I'll be waiting. In the rain. In your memory. In the way your body fits mine even in dreams. Always, Adam. Maya pressed the letter to her chest, curled forward, and let the tears fall. She wasn't the type to cry. Not often. Not for men. But this wasn't about a man, it was about magic. Something real, fleeting, that neither of them knew how to name while they had it. She read the letter again. And again. Then she lit a fire. Not to burn it, but to feel it. To remember how his hands had warmed her there. How he'd said her name like it was a secret. Later that night, as the stars peeked through clearing clouds, she began to write something of her own. 2 weeks had passed since the cabin. Maya was back in the city now, her city. The noise of it, once familiar, now felt loud in all the wrong ways. The hum of traffic didn't soothe her. The lights didn't sparkle, they glared. Nothing felt quite real. Every corner of her apartment held pieces of her old life, a life that suddenly felt too tight, like clothes that didn't fit anymore. The only place that made sense was her bedroom window, where she could watch the rain and pretend she was still wrapped in his arms. The letter Adam left had been read so many times it was soft at the edges, smudged where her thumbs always pressed. It was hidden beneath her pillow now, a secret talisman against loneliness. She hadn't written back. Not yet. But every night, she drafted something in her mind. Some version of what if, scribbled silently between sleep and memory. Across the country, Adam was different now too. He'd gone back to work, back to suits and schedules, to conversations that felt like cardboard. But every free moment, he found himself replaying her voice. Her laugh. The way her fingers dragged along his back in the dark. The cabin had ruined him for casual. He didn't want numb anymore. One night, After a long day, he poured himself a glass of wine and sat at his desk. The moonlight cut across the room, soft and silver. He opened his journal, paused. Then, he began to write. Maya, I don't know what this is anymore. Hope? Madness? Maybe both. But I keep seeing you. In every cloud that lingers. In the way my bed is too cold on one side. In the damn coffee that never tastes the same. I'm not writing to pull you back. I don't want to chain you to a fantasy. But if there's a version of this where we don't let go, tell me. I'll come running. He sealed it. Stared at it. Then tucked it in his coat the next morning, just in case. Just in case the courage found him. Meanwhile, Maya was standing in a bookstore when she saw it, a notebook, leather-bound, deep green like the moss outside their cabin. She opened it. Blank pages. Endless space. She bought it without thinking. That night, she filled the first page. It was Maya's first night out in weeks. Her best friend had insisted, dragged her to a gallery opening downtown. Something about new beginnings and getting out of her head. Maya went along half-heartedly, dressed in black with a soft silk scarf tied at her neck, the same one Adam had once untied slowly, teasingly, in front of a flickering fireplace. The crowd buzzed with wine and low jazz. People moved from canvas to sculpture, murmuring in that elegant hush only art spaces seemed to cultivate. She stood before a moody oil painting of a forest trail, wet with imagined rain. Her breath caught. It looked just like the path behind the cabin. The one where he first kissed her beneath the storm. Suddenly, something shifted in the air. A pull. She turned. And across the gallery, half a room away, stood Adam. Hair a bit shorter. Jacket slung casually over his shoulder. He hadn't seen her yet. He was listening to a woman speak, nodding, smiling politely. But he looked restless. As if he'd rather be somewhere else. And then, he turned. Their eyes met. And the room disappeared. Time stalled, just for a second. Long enough for a rush of memories to fill the silence. The heat of their last kiss. The way he'd said her name like it meant something sacred. The ache of the letter in her pillowcase. Maya blinked. Adam stepped forward. So did she. They met somewhere between sculpture and shadow. Inches apart. Hearts pounding. Faces unreadable. Neither spoke. Then he reached for her, slow, reverent, and tucked her hair behind her ear. Just like before. I wasn't sure if this was real, he whispered. It is, she said, voice barely audible. It always was. They stood there, eyes locked, as the crowd drifted around them like mist. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Later, they'd find a quiet corner. Talk. Laugh nervously. Catch up on all the little things, how the city had changed, how work didn't feel quite right anymore, how neither of them had stopped thinking about the other. But for now, it was just this. Two people. One rain-soaked love. And a second chance, handed to them by fate. They didn't plan anything. They just walked. After the gallery, Adam and Maya slipped into the city like ghosts returning to a dream. The night air was cool, the streets slick with leftover rain. Streetlights shimmered in puddles, and their shadows followed close, always intertwined. Adam's coat brushed against her hip. Maya's fingers grazed his knuckles. And then, Finally, they held hands. It was nothing dramatic. No fireworks. No declarations. Just the simple, sacred truth, I still want to touch you. They passed a closed cafe where a jazz record still played softly through the window. He pulled her close, right there on the sidewalk, and began to sway. "You're dancing with me?" she asked, amused. "I never got to in the cabin," he murmured. She laughed, soft and warm, and let herself sink into his arms. They wandered through bookstores, late-night markets, and alleyways strung with fairy lights. They talked about everything and nothing. About how hard it had been, how easy it felt now. About dreams, mistakes, and how neither had truly let go. They even joked about the cabin. "You left me with no coffee," she teased. "You left me with no sleep," he grinned. Hours passed like minutes. Eventually, they ended up in front of her building. The pause between them was electric. "I'm not expecting anything," he said, voice low. "I know. But if I leave now, I'll dream of you again. And I'm tired of waking up alone." She didn't reply with words. She stepped forward, slid her arms around his neck, and kissed him. Deeply. Slowly. Like two hearts learning how to breathe and sink again. Upstairs, the city hummed outside while they moved through her apartment like dancers in a silent ballet. Clothes found the floor. Skin rediscovered skin. And every sigh, every whispered name, filled the empty corners with something real again. They didn't rush. They remembered. The curve of her waist. The weight of his shoulders. The taste of goodbye, replaced now by the promise of more. When it was over, they stayed wrapped in each other. Breathing. Touching. Not speaking, because the words would come in the morning. Tonight was for feeling. For being. The golden light spilled slowly across Maya's bedroom. Soft. Reluctant. Like it, too, wanted to linger in the warmth of last night. Adam lay on his side, facing her, already awake. His hand rested gently on her bare waist, thumb tracing a slow, absent-minded circle. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, neither said a word. Then he smiled, a quiet kind of joy tucked in the corners of his mouth. "Morning," he whispered. She smiled back. "Morning." And just like that, the spell broke. They got up quietly. Showered. She handed him a towel like she used to. He brewed the coffee like he'd never stopped. It felt strangely natural. Their bodies remembered the rhythm, but the silence spoke louder now. And it asked the question neither dared voice: what happens next? Over breakfast, the words began to drip between sips and slices of toast. "I've been thinking about the cabin," he said finally, breaking the calm. "About us. About why I left." Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I got scared," he continued. "Not of you. Of feeling that much. Of what it meant." She nodded. "I know. I felt it too." The truth sat heavy between them. He leaned back. "But it hasn't gone away. Not in the city. Not with anyone else." She studied her mug, fingers tracing the rim. "Adam, what do you want from this?" "From me?" He reached across the table. Took her hand. "I want to stop running. I want you. Whatever that looks like." Maya's eyes glistened, just barely. "You don't get to want me just because you miss me." she said softly. You get to want me if you're ready to stay. A long silence. Then a slow, almost trembling nod. I'm ready, he said. And this time, he meant it. Later, as they stood by the window, watching the city pulse beneath them, Maya rested her head on his shoulder. I don't know how we do this, she whispered. Neither do I, he replied. But I want to find out. With you. Outside, the sun broke through a passing cloud. And in her heart, something opened. That afternoon, after Adam left to meet a client, Maya sat alone in her apartment. The city hummed outside like a distant memory. Her thoughts drifted, not to the night before, not to his hands on her skin or the warmth in his eyes. No, her mind wandered back to the space between. The years without him. The 8 she had tucked into journals, into dreams, into that one drawer she never opened. Until now. She crossed the room slowly, barefoot, heart pounding. There, at the back of her closet, was a narrow wooden box wrapped in an old silk scarf. She sat on the floor with it, fingers trembling slightly as she undid the knot. Inside, bundles of scribbled thoughts. Letters. Unsent. Unspoken. All of them, for him. The one she pulled out was dated 2 years ago. She remembered that night vividly. It had rained. Of course it had. She unfolded the letter carefully and began to read aloud, her voice a whisper against the silence. Adam, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe to scream into the void without actually being heard. Maybe to hold on to something that doesn't want to be held. You left, and I told myself I was fine. That the rain would stop. That the ache in my chest was just the weather. But you were the storm, weren't you? The soft kind, the kind that drowns you slowly. I hated you for leaving. I loved you even more for having the courage to. I don't know which truth hurts worse. Maya, she sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in her hands. And then, slowly, she reached for a pen, turned the page, and began writing again. Adam, you're back now. And part of me still feels like that girl sitting on the floor crying into paper. But I've changed. And maybe you have too. So if we're doing this again, it won't be with ghosts between us. It won't be with things left unsaid. I need to give this to you. Not because I want to hurt you, but because if we're going to love again, we need to know who we are now. All of us. Even the broken parts. Maya, she folded both letters gently, slid them into a new envelope, and wrote his name in delicate ink. Tomorrow, she'd give it to him. And whatever happened next, she would know she had finally said everything. The rain returned 2 days later. Not the soft mist of nostalgia, not the heavy drops of sorrow. No, this was a quiet, steady rainfall. Certain, gentle, inevitable. Like a heartbeat you had forgotten was there. Maya stood by the cafe window, envelope still clutched in her coat pocket. The same one she'd written. The same one she hadn't given him yet. He was late. Her coffee was cold. And still, she waited. Adam arrived soaked through, cheeks flushed from running. He paused at the door, caught her eyes through the glass, and entered without a word. She watched him shake off the water like a man coming in for more than just the rain. You look like a stray dog, she teased gently. He grinned. Guess I found my way home, then. They sat across from each other, familiar but changed. He reached for her hand, but she held up the envelope instead. "I need you to read this first," she said softly. He hesitated, eyes flickering between her and the letter. Then he nodded. Slowly. As he read, his face shifted, confusion, ache, guilt, then something softer. Something older. Like recognition. When he finished, he folded it and placed it beside his cup. "I deserve every word," he said. "No," she replied. "You don't. But I needed to say them anyway." There was silence again. But this one was different. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes after. Adam looked up at her. His eyes weren't pleading. They weren't desperate. They were open. Steady. Whole. "I'm still in love with you," he said simply. She blinked, but didn't look away. "Then show me," she whispered. They left the cafe hand in hand, stepping out into the rain. No umbrellas. No shields. Just skin and sky and truth. And there, under the gray canopy of clouds, they kissed again, not with urgency, not with memory, but with intention. A kiss that said, "We've weathered this. Now let's begin." They drove north again. Not fast. Not like before. This time, they moved with intention. The same winding roads. The same hills bathed in fog. The same trees standing like sentinels of memory. But the air between them? It was different now. Unburdened. Unafraid. Adam glanced over at Maya as she stared out the window, her lips curved in a soft, knowing smile. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She turned to him, her voice light and sure. "That we're not going back. We're going forward. And the cabin, it just happens to be where the next chapter begins." The place hadn't changed. The creak of the wood. The scent of pine and fire and rain in the walls. Even the old blankets still folded by the window seat. But when they stepped through the door, something inside them had. They were no longer two broken people reaching for a night's comfort. They were two whole souls, choosing to stay. That night, they didn't make love like people trying to remember. They did it like people writing something new. Her hands found him with trust. His lips found her with reverence. Their bodies moved slow, no urgency, no desperation. Just deep, aching presence. The rain tapped the roof like a lullaby. And when she fell asleep on his chest, he whispered into her hair, "You're not a memory anymore. You're my home." In the morning, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear, soft blue stretching endlessly above them. Maya stepped outside barefoot, coffee in hand, feeling the earth damp beneath her feet. Adam joined her in silence, wrapping an arm around her waist. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. Because this wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning.